Alright, we're filming in a different way today because, focusing on this. Can't really show it off on camera if I'm on camera all that well, so this is gonna be weird. I'm not used to expressing like this, I'm not used to filming like this. It's a bit weird with the camera and the microphone all in my way, blocking my vision, having to look through the screen on the camera, have to look up at the screen through the camera. It's a whole mess. But anyways, we'll take a look at this stuff today. Ignore these. They're just here to fill out the empty space, and they kind of fit with what we're talking about. Yeah, this is like the first, I suppose, test of a new style of content I want to do here on this channel. I'll talk about that a bit at the end. But anyways, I'm Luna. This is Lunatic History, and today we are taking a look at my binder of photographs.
Let's bury the hatchet, let's bury the hatchet, let's bury the hatchet in the Kaiser's head. We'll crown him on the noodle, make him whistle Yankee Doodle, shouting the battle cry of Wilson.
So now that y'all had that fun little intro, let's open this up and take a look inside of here. Getting into the Civil War era of stuff. I don't have much, but I have a few interesting things. So this right here is not an original photograph, but it is a photograph of my great-great-great-great-grandfather, James Washington Quinn. Which, let me tell y'all, that's a lot of greats right there that's hard to keep track of. But we've got a photo of him right here, and then all this stuff that you're sort of seeing through there as well are some documents on him. So you can start seeing him appear. But real quick, let me read off his story for y'all because it's quite fascinating. James Washington Quinn, born 1842, fought for Confederates, drove a mule team, and wounded at Battle of Bull Run. Married after the Civil War, fathered 5 boys, 1 girl. She is grandmother of Uncle Buddy. Now, Uncle Buddy, to the best of my memory, is my own grandfather. I will, of course, as always, if I make a mistake, edit that on screen, so I think I'm right there, but on the off chance I'm not, there'll be a correction right here. Anyways, we're just getting some more documents on him. These are just different things that were printed off at some point. Again, not original, and then we're getting to the original papers there included in the other ones. You can see these are sort of sealed. The other ones, the seal had come off, so it was better to just stick them in here. But it's just some different documents on him, good stuff to have, of course. And then here, we're out of the Civil War and into pre-World War I. And I've only got 2 things here that are really sort of pre-World War I that belong in this section. This is a postcard someone wrote beautiful, which I will certainly agree, of the battery at West Point on the Hudson River. And then this one is the Soldiers and Sailors Monument in New York City. This is dedicated to Union soldiers and sailors in during the Civil War. And it's actually still around today. That's in a very sad state of disrepair. But if y'all are ever in the area and you see it, hey, send me some pics of it. I would love to see y'all going on an adventure to this cool little place. Sadly, neither one was actually used, but this one has a little bit of information on it and everything, which is personally one of my favorite things about old postcards like that, is some of them having the information on the location or the photograph or whatever. This is quite a nice World War I portrait of an officer, along with this photo right here, which is at an unfortunate angle, but this one is of actually the same guy. Andrew Larson, I believe his name is. I'm not actually sure on the spelling, so I haven't been able to research him yet. I will eventually get all that done. But, for now, they're just some nice photos in the collection. A portrait of an officer, and then said officer with his men at some camp somewhere. It's quite nice. Nothing too fancy, but certainly very nice to have in the collection. This photo, I'm sure, is familiar to a great many of y'all. This is of Hunter Ashby Pendleton, and in most of my videos, you'll actually see the grouping of him right next to me. In fact, it's right next to me right now. I just don't have it on screen, of course, filming this way. But I've posted his grouping a couple times. It was the first one I did when I sort of redid my approach with content on Instagram. So it should be one y'all are well familiar with, and one of my personal favorite whole sets in the collection. The photograph itself is not anything amazing, just a photograph of him while on furlough in September 1917, as the caption says up there. But it's certainly a nice portrait, and the whole history that comes with it is amazing. So, definitely a great thing to have. And then this reverse side has some portraits of him with some folks, maybe? We'll have to pull this out, actually. But this photo right here, our home, Gadsden, Alabama. Now, my man, Hunter Ashby Pendleton, was from Richmond, Virginia. So I don't know what the connection to Gadsden, Alabama is. Haven't been able to find anything. And there's certainly nothing on here that actually says who these folks are. So it's one of those just great mysteries in the collection. I don't really know what's going on with it, but they're certainly nice photos to have at the very least. Now, these two are both local finds. They're quite nice. This one of my personal favorite photos in the collection, is of a group of German soldiers in 1917 graduating from training camp. The sign reads off, pardon my probably not great pronunciation, but the sign reads off Die Infliegen, perhaps Inftigen, or even Infliegen, something like that. Bergjungen van Stube 108. I'm probably right on that number. I am still learning German, so I could be a bit wrong on that. But you would think that Berg would, of course, be mountain, but there's a period after it, and from my research and from some help from other folks, it seems that these men are actually from the Bergisches Land region of Germany, so being able to identify where they may have been from is just quite nice. It just fills out the story so much, and it's just fascinating information to have. And then this postcard, perhaps of the postcards I have, is my personal favorite, showing the medium Mark A. Whippet tank in action, which is actually my favorite tank from the First World War. These days, it wouldn't really be considered a tank, but it's certainly, within the First World War, it was just a fascinating one. Everyone knows the heavy tanks, the British Mark IV, the German A7V, stuff like that, and everyone knows the French FT-17. But there's just something about the Whippet that is just, oh, it's so cool, it's so cool. And on the reverse side, you can actually see a photograph, very rough condition, very faded, torn around most of it, of one of the soldiers' families, it seems. So that's very cool as well. Again, helps fill out the story just a tiny little bit. Here we have a couple more World War I postcards. This one showing a British anti-aircraft gun, and this one showing the Mark IV tank Britannia, which, there are actually two Britannias, and from my research, I believe this was actually the same one from that famous footage of the Mark IV tank crushing the car in Canada, I believe it was. I'll edit that on screen. It's a great piece of footage. I can't say for sure, but I believe this is the same tank from that footage. So very cool to have this. But regardless of which Britannia it was, that both of them do have some solid history to them. So very cool to have that. And I should say, from this point on, these postcards to a certain point, and then the two that were pre-World War I that I showed off earlier, are all from the same set that I bought a while back. But this one is actually not World War I, but it's roughly the same era. This is a Maxim machine gun, an M1904 Maxim, in the Pancho Villa expedition, so very cool there. A little bit of history that you don't hear quite as much about these days, so very cool to have that. And then this one just has some Americans training with some artillery guns. Perhaps nothing too fancy, but I love the old postcards, old photos like this, so very, very cool to have. These two are my favorites in this set. A captured German anti-aircraft gun, the truck it was on, clearly in very rough condition. And then a gun captured from the German ship Emden, which was actually the second ship to bear that name in the First World War. The first one was destroyed, and then there was a second Emden, and if memory serves correctly, it was after the war given to the French, and ultimately used by them for target practice, which was, well, perhaps it would have been better to have a longer ending to that, have it be preserved, used as, a teaching aid, some kind of museum, something like that. But at least it had a bit more life and had certainly an interesting story. So very, very cool to have a photograph of gun off of one of the coolest ships I've researched. Then here, this one is the last one from that set, at least with World War One. There are a couple World War II sort of era postcards from that set, but this one just shows a artillery gun being carried by a tractor. Nothing particularly interesting, but very nice. And this right here, perhaps my favorite photograph of the collection, and I am going to say that about a few different ones, so it doesn't mean much, it just means I particularly like these ones. But this one comes from my great-grandfather, and is of men of the 29th Infantry Division having a military funeral, so a much sadder one than a lot of the ones in here, but very beautiful, very striking photograph, and one that has stuck with me ever since I saw it. Unfortunately, no information on the back, at least with how faded it is, none that can be made out, but certainly a great photo, great postcard to have. And speaking of my great-grandfather, here are 4 photographs of him. This one, of course, from World War I, a very small photograph. These 3, well, it says 66 here. On the reverse, you can see it right here, sort of. This says that these were taken in 1974, which would have been not too long before he passed away, unfortunately, but it is nice to have these photographs of him back in the uniform and everything. He clearly put on a bit of weight, but, you know, to see exactly what medals he had, to see the patch on his uniform and everything is quite nice. To see him with his wife, my great-grandmother, and then, of course, my grandfather is just fascinating and fantastic, and I'm sure phenomenal. I'm sure some other words that don't have the f sound, but very great photos to have. I'm glad that these ones were taken and that I've got them in the collection. And moving out of World War I into World War II, neither of these are like original things, but they're cool to have in here. This is just a stamp from D-Day, nothing fancy, but, you know, cool little thing. It was biggered away in the box of fan photographs. I was like, huh, into the collection that goes. And then this, I got this by pre-ordering Andrew Biggio's book, The Rifle, which, if y'all have not read it, high recommendation. One of the best history books I have ever read. But this is signed by Robert A. White, World War II veteran, one of the men wrote about one of the men whose stories appears in the book. Very, very cool to have. Just anything signed by World War II veteran is just, you know, that stuff is going to become rarer and rarer as they die off. It's going to become more and more in demand, and while this is something that I never plan on selling or anything, it is very cool to have. It does, I'm sure, have some level of monetary value, but for that that historical value of, you know, this is something that was touched by, this is something that was written on by a man who saw these major historical events. It adds, in a sense, some tangibility to it, and for me, that's fascinating and very important. Now, these 2, of all the postcards I have, I'm saying it again, perhaps some of my favorites in the collection. Both of them are very cool. This one comes from that same set I was talking about, showing men in San Antonio, Texas, at, you know, on a bunch of trucks, captured to life in the army camps adjacent to San Antonio, Texas, and then up here ready for a ride. And then this one is of the experimental aircraft XPB-2Y-1. And I researched this thing a while back, and I've already forgotten everything about it, so I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but it is cool to have, you know, anything experimental I quite like. Experimental aircraft, that's very cool, and it's a big one, too, from the looks of it, so very, very cool to see. But both of these were used. This one, the soldier who sent this was talking about a ring size, so perhaps letting his folks know about getting an engagement ring for the girl he wanted to marry or something. Speculation, of course, but certainly I hope that's the case. And then this one, he's really just talking about his daily life, the weather, things like that. And while, you know, perhaps these aren't anything of, like, major historical importance, like, they're not talking about, oh yeah, I saw this major historical event or anything. It's these glimpses into sort of who they were, into their lives, and that's the stuff that really makes history worth learning for me, because, like, again, it makes it more tangible. It's the glimpse into the real people instead of, you know, these major events and major figures and everything. It's just people who were living lives, and I love that stuff. So that these 2 were sent out and everything is just it's amazing. This is the other photograph from that set, or the other postcard from that set, and I believe the final one as well, of the main post exchange in Maxwell Field, Alabama. There's no particularly interesting thing behind this. I've got family in that area, so that's cool, but there's no real connection with this. It's just a nice postcard to have. This one, though, of Naval Air Station in Jacksonville, Florida. One of my great-great-uncles, Uncle Clyde, was stationed there in World War II. So, at least he was temporarily stationed there. So, finding that at some local antique store, I honestly cannot remember where I found it at this point. It was just those little family connections that I always try to get postcards of areas family members were at, because I've got a deeper connection to, say, this place than any of the camps or forts in North Carolina, even though I live in North Carolina. So, finding this was just great, especially since I found it not long after I learned his story. So that was just good timing there. Unfortunately, neither were sent. These two, Fort McClellan in World War II, and if y'all know me, y'all know I absolutely love Fort and what was earlier Camp McClellan, as my great-grandfather trained there in World War I. I have a lot of stuff from the camp and from the fort. So finding these again in a local antique store was, it was amazing. I was very much doing the pog face when I discovered them, and I knew I had to get them, and I picked them up in a heartbeat. There were so many other postcards I was looking at getting, and these were the ones I settled on because my great-grandfather was there only a couple decades before these ones were taken, these ones were made, and yeah, that family connection, I've talked about this a lot in the past. That family connection makes history so fascinating, and is really a great way to get folks interested in history, to talk about stuff that, their family members may have been a part of. But again, sadly not used, but both do have a tiny bit of information, so that's quite nice. These two, this one is of Private First Class Claude Bagwell, who is at one point wounded in France, a little newspaper clipping about that. And I believe this is also a photograph of him. There is a slight chance, a very slight chance, that this is someone my grandfather knew in the Cold War, but the uniform and just the guy's face look more like World War II, and then of course the guy's face seems to match up. So I've got these displayed together, seem to be the same guy, so very cool to have two photos of him. This is getting into family members. These two at the top are of my uncle, Uncle John. And then these two are my Uncle Malcolm. And all of my uncles are great-great-uncles. So I just call them Uncle, whatever their name is, just for ease. But very nice photos. This my personal favorite, just because, he's with his woman. It's very sweet. I always love seeing photos like that. But all of these are quite nice. He was artillery over in Europe. He was a medic. You can probably not on camera, but you can, in the photos, see the medic pin, medic collar tab. And he was, I believe, with the 852nd Engineer Aviation Battalion. I don't know how that worked out. Being a medic with an Engineer Aviation Battalion, it's a whole mess. I don't understand it, but that seems to be what the case was. So that's quite interesting. And then here's the man himself, Uncle Clyde, who I mentioned. He was Navy, radio technician for aircraft, I believe. And then, I don't actually know who this is. Probably a family member. He was Coastal Artillery. That's all I know. This comes from a postcard, because you can sort of see some of the remnants there. No idea who this guy is. I'm going to look through the big box of family photographs soon, and maybe I'll find some more stuff of him. As of right now, he's just some guy that we've got a photo of, and unfortunately that is the case with a lot of things. But here, I think this is the point where we get out of World War II into the Cold War. These are of Private Charles Erb, who I have quite a lot of stuff from, and actually over this way have a massive photo book that these three actually came from. They were loose in there. Lots of stuff from him. I'm going to do a dedicated video one day, dedicated Instagram post one day. But here's just a photograph of him, and then some photos that came from his photo book. Very, very nice stuff. These two bits of money, this one Japanese, this one Taiwanese, I believe, came from him. And then here's just some other, occupied, some money for an area occupied by the U.S. Army that my mom got me some point years ago. So I just threw them in here because it's all military money, or it's all money. These ones, of course, not military. But it just displays well together. These two and these two do not go together, but they display together. But yeah, just some more stuff from this guy. Very cool. Oh, there's a note on this photograph. I have not noticed that before. Let's see if we can read this. So it didn't come out to, I can't make out that word. And then dust that is in my bed, it seems. So probably something about being away for a while, bed getting dusty, I'm not sure. I'll try to make out that word later. But I'm always noticing something new when I'm working on these projects. But yeah, here, 3 local antique store finds, actually all from the same antique store. They're just nice military photos that were super cheap. I think each one of these photos was like $1 each. So, $3 for 3 cool photos. Can't turn that down. These two show some duck boats, very cool. And this one, just a guy with a truck. Nothing too fancy, but again, for $3, you can't really turn that down. So I'm very glad to have these. They're very cool photographs. Here we have a postcard of Fort Knox, where my grandfather trained at for a short while. And then I have a Ushanka from, a Russian Ushanka. It's got a lovely pin on it. Very nice hat. And this is just a note from the man who gave it to me, detailing a bit of the story about it. So, this is much like the 2 World War II things I showed off earlier. Not really directly historical, but worth putting in here. Definitely has some history related to it. And speaking of Ushankas, Soviet, we're getting into some Soviet stuff. These are this is the instruction paper for the R2 respirator. This is actually the same respirator that a lot of the Chernobyl liquidators used. If y'all have seen HBO's Chernobyl show, you saw this mask everywhere. So, very, very cool little thing. Perhaps not a lot of history behind it outside of that, outside of Chernobyl, but definitely a cool little item. You don't really see masks like that very often. It's sort of like a fabric-y, foamy outside with a plastic inside. It's very weird, but very cool. And then this is another Chernobyl-related thing. This is a little paper thing that came with my liquidator medal. Honestly, it might be a fake. From my research, I don't think this metal ribbon style was actually used, but it's cool to have. More research needs to go into it, but for now, it goes in here, and it's a cool looking thing, so even if it is fake, it's nice to have. Certainly not a fake that I spent a ton of money on if it was, so no major complaints to be made if that ends up being the case. But here we have just some photos of my grandfather, quite a lot of them. This one, I love the back, he look good. Just someone wrote that on there. That's quite amusing. More photos of him with some other people. He, in this one, wearing some sunglasses, looking very cool. He wasn't very cool. He was racist and just a nasty person in general, but he sure did look cool. This is a photo of him with his Jeep, and then a photo of his driver with his Jeep. Another photo of him with his Jeep, my personal favorite I have of him. He just, again, he wasn't all that cool, but he looks so cool in this one, and I really want to get this Jeep one day because it just looks great. I'd love to drive that around town. And a photo of him firing off some gun. Very cool, very cool. Photo of him with, I believe this is a Walker Bulldog, and a photo of his commander with, I believe, a M48 Patton. Here we have another photo, actually the last photo in here, just of a tank being stored away, it looks like. Don't know the full story behind this one, but a very cool photo to have. Now, as I said, we are to the end. Unfortunately, I would love to rant about some more stuff. But this is really just a brief, very small amount of all the photos and documents I have. I have a lot of books like this, a whole lot of those, a lot of larger photos and documents that don't fit in here. Today, I just wanted to show off this small little binder, and this is part of a thing I want to start doing in the future, where every now and then, I just take, an item or a display or something like that I just think is cool and would like to rant about for a little bit, would like to ramble about, and make a video on it. It's not going to be something too common, and I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, here's my GP5 gas mask or anything. But I might one day make a video on my, once I get it made, I might make a video on my display of my experimental body armor and helmet. Of course, one day I'll make a video on Charles Erb that I briefly talked about. I've got a quite nice little set of some U.S. Navy items from World War II. Might make a video on those. Any different things like that, where I'm not doing the super common stuff, but I'm not necessarily doing something that has this long story to it or anything. It's just every now and then I've got something that I think is pretty cool that I'd like to talk about for a bit. So, yeah, this was, I guess, a test run for that, so let me know down in the comments if that is something I want to see more of, just every now and then. Just a short, little, more casual video about something cool in the collection. You know, a little bit of history on it, but mostly just showing off a really fun item, a really cool item, or whatever. It's certainly something I'm excited about doing in the future. There's a lot of different stuff I could be doing in the future, but I think that's a good way to get some content happening, at least somewhat frequently, getting a bit more stuff happening, so it's not like once a year I have some big video come out and there's nothing until next year. But yeah, I do have a lot of plans. There's another video that's going to be happening sometime soon, reviewing a pretty nice reproduction item, and then, I'm trying to get together a team of folks to do that Ford Model 8 meme video that I've been talking about for a little bit. So there's other stuff in the works. No idea when either of those will happen, but they will happen, I can say that much. But yeah, that is it for this video. So y'all know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. If there are any items I've posted on my Instagram, or even items I haven't, but y'all are aware of that you think would make a good video, put them down below. I'll probably add them to the list of just cool things I want to talk about, because most of the stuff I have, I can rant about it at least for a little bit. There's links to, my Instagram where I post a lot of history stuff, my Discord server, Twitter, all this different stuff in the description. You can check that out. And I think that's it. So thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll be seeing y'all.